Today's presenter is Aron Talenfeld, one of our own, works for Campus Recreation as a personal trainer. Aron's been accredited as a personal trainer by the American Council on Exercise, and that's one of our, the fitness industry's more prominent organizations or governing bodies. But he's been a personal trainer through them since 2007. Aron's overarching goal is to help his clients become their own trainer. His areas of expertise include healthy nutrition, weight loss, muscle gain, functional strength, flexibility, agility, balance, cardiorespiratory and muscular endurance, and healthy posture. His favorite modalities include suspension training, more commonly referred to as the TRX system, capital T, capital R, capital X, calisthenics and bodyweight exercises, dumbbells, kettlebells, machines, cycling, running, and animal flow. And just a quick side note, Aron has, I'm not sure how many years he's been on our staff right now without looking it up, but he continues to impress me almost by the day with his vast knowledge of not just fitness, but his in areas outside of fitness. So we're really fortunate to have him as a member of our staff. And without further ado, Aron Talenfeld.
Thanks, Matt. Always too kind. It's my pleasure to be here, and I appreciate everybody taking the time out of their busy day to be here. I'll probably hold questions until the end so that we can make sure to get through everything, but it's a short little routine that I have to show you, so we should have plenty of time at the end for any questions that you have. Let me go ahead and pin myself here. Okay, great. So let's start off. I'll go ahead and share my screen so that you can see this routine I have set up. This is just at budzer.com/strength. And that's up online so that if you have any trouble viewing my screen, you can pull that up for yourself. And essentially all we're going to talk about is how do we design a workout routine that's both effective and safe, keeping in mind 5 basic guidelines. These are pretty simple things. I think anyone can master them with a little bit of practice. But unfortunately, any routine that you find online is going to be lacking in one or more of these things more often than not. I will also put a little bit of a warning on here. A little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. So if you have any questions in terms of designing your own routine, you have any contraindicated exercises that your doctor or physical therapist has said, hey, don't do that, or if you just have any questions in general, please feel free to reach out to me or any NCCA accredited personal trainer before trying these exercises out for yourself. So let's jump in. What you see here is an example of a pulling exercise. She's hanging on to a bar here, but this could be a TRX. It could even be the edge of a stable dining room table if that's all she had to work with. But first off, we want to think about incorporating all basic compound movements when we're starting our program design. So these are compound movements in the sense that we have multiple joints moving at the same time. They're going to be functional in the sense that they tend to mimic movements in the real world. And to start off with that, we have the push. It's exactly what it sounds like. People tend to think of a push-up, for example. But this could be a standing push using a cable machine. It could be a push on a standard type of weightlifting selectorized machine. We have a pull. This is obviously going to work the muscles of the posterior, the back, the shoulders, the biceps on the front. And we have what I call squat. Now, I use this term very generally, which is to say I encompass all exercises that are multi-joint exercises for the legs. So that's things like lunges, step-ups. I'll even throw in deadlifts and kettlebell swings. Those last two tend to get towards a category of fundamental movements that some people would put in a category of its own. Some people would call those hinges. And my philosophy on hinge is we don't necessarily need to emphasize the hips as in a hip hinge or a good morning, we can get everything we need to out of the hamstrings and glutes, provided we work through our full range of motion, as we get to on the second category here. So in other words, if we select the right amount of load, the optimal load for our exercises, and we don't have a reason to specifically avoid it, by getting all the way down into a deep squat, you're going to be able to put some tension on the hamstrings, tension on the glutes, and get the activation that you need out of those muscles without doing kettlebell swings. There are ways to target those muscles individually, but you don't necessarily need to do that. So moving on to the next one here. Oh, and before I forget, where is the core? That's another category. Some people will have 5: push, pull, squat, core, and hinge. This is a perfect example of a pull that also incorporates anti-rotation through the core. So her obliques, her quadratus lumborum, these muscles are working like crazy to keep her trunk parallel to the ground as she moves through that dynamic movement. If she wanted to, she could even drop that floating shoulder as she goes down, if she isn't going to bonk into the ground here, and then lift it as she reaches. And that would incorporate some dynamic movement for the obliques. So number 2 is to work within your full active range of motion in all 3 planes of movement. So what do we mean by full active range of motion? If everybody at home or at work could follow along here, I just want you to take your arms out in front of your shoulders. And from there, we're just going to slowly, gently lift them up as high as they'll go comfortably without lifting the chest. I want to keep the chest down, the neck neutral. And now you're going to notice at a certain point that you're not able to lift any further. So here I am from the side, and I'll end up somewhere between my ears with my biceps. And essentially what I've discovered here is for me to go further back, I would have to rely on gravity. I'd have to arch my back, and that would get me outside of my active range. Active range is where you can go on your own without any external assistance. It's important to utilize that full active range, because if we don't use it, we lose it over time. And it's actually an intentional thing that I don't mention stretching in here. If you stay within that full active range of motion with each workout and throughout your daily life, you're not going to lose that range of motion. That said, if we exceed our active range of motion, we're putting ourselves at risk for injury. It can be done safely, but it has to be done mindfully. So what do we mean by all 3 planes of motion? Well, it's basically the same as 3 dimensions. If you were in math class, that would be X, Y, and Z. But for our purposes, we're going to call them sagittal, frontal, and transverse. Sagittal being the one we're in right now if we're seated. That is to say, we've got our hips flexed, our knees bent. That's the plane that cuts you into right and left sides. Frontal plane is the one that cuts you into front and back. And transverse or horizontal is the one that cuts your body in top and bottom. They'll be a little bit more clear as we go on. So this is the fun part. And this is one of the things I find missing most frequently in routines that pop up online in the news feed. We want to work muscles in opposing pairs. That is simply to say that when I push like this, I want to do the mirror opposite pull like this. Exercises have something called an eccentric and a concentric movement. Eccentric is where the muscles are lengthening under stress, and concentric is where the muscles are shortening, when they're contracted and their point from insertion to origin is coming closer together. And we basically want to flip those two. So in other words, when I do push-ups, I'm going from, let's say, this starting position here, let's say hands in front of shoulders, and my arms are coming out to the sides, I'm coming down, my chest pectoralis muscle is lengthening, right? That's the eccentric contraction. And then when I do my push, which the exercise handily has in its name, I'm doing the concentric contraction. Those muscle fibers are shortening up, pulling my origin towards the insertion. Now that's the concentric, and when I flip into my pull mode, I'm just going to flip the script. So when I'm doing a pull, let's say I'm hanging on a TRX or I'm seated at a machine, I'm going to do my concentric using the muscles of the back and the biceps, and my eccentric as I relax a little bit and let those weights come back down. Some people get this straight away. Some people, they have to work on it. So let's get a look at some different ways to do this. The first thing I hear when people get excited about body weight exercise or exercising outside of the gym is, I've got this great push-up and pull-up routine. So this is a pretty advanced version of the push-up that you see here, but basically we're working the same muscles. And here you see a regressed version of the pull-up using some assistance from the selectorized machine. The trouble with this setup for your push and your pull is that we're working in a particular configuration here. That's with my elbows up almost 90 degrees and pressing here. And then we're pulling from a different configuration, from up here to here. So he's moving sort of through that frontal plane, and I'm moving through the horizontal or transverse plane at the shoulders here. The trouble with this, if this is the only two exercises you do for push and pull, is that we're strengthening internal shoulder rotators in both exercises. So for the push-ups, we are strengthening the pectoralis major, which is going to have the effect of rotating those shoulders in if it gets too tight or too overactive. And likewise, on the pull-up, we're strengthening the latissimus dorsi, biggest muscle of the back. And this muscle is also, because of the way it inserts on the humerus here, an internal rotator. So if you ever see that sort of Neanderthal look in the weight room, oftentimes it's because of these two exercises. So that's the wrong way to do it. Let's look at some good examples. So if we did want to do that pull-up, maybe we do a neutral grip pull-up. In this case, his hands are at about shoulder width apart, and he's moving through the sagittal plane. And to counterbalance that, we would do the exact mirror opposite, which is just a shoulder press. So we start here, and we press the weights right up over the shoulders. If you are going to try this one, slightly more advanced exercise, make sure to keep your glutes engaged, your abdominals braced. She's got one of the best neutral spines I think I've ever seen on a shoulder press. Okay, here we have a version of the pull. This is a low row, a one-arm dumbbell row. And you can't really tell very well, but his elbow is right up against his rib cage here. And that's why when we do our push, we're going to do it the same exact way. Elbows in, gracing the rib cage with every repetition. Here's a much more advanced version of that shoulder press that also incorporates a squat. The reason this is so much more advanced is there's a lot more at play. So we talked about compound exercises. This is like a double compound exercise. She's doing her push with her shoulders. She's doing her squat at almost the same time. It's up to you whether you pause right here before going down or whether you integrate those two movements. The mirror opposite is a little bit tricky on this one. She's going into hip flexion, knee flexion, and we basically want to do that same thing, but instead of working the posterior chain as we do here, we want to work the anterior chain with a knee tuck. Here are some of my favorite exercises. We've got the wood chop and the hay baler. So in this example, with the wood chop, you can picture the axe in his hand. He's going from a high shoulder extended position, shoulder flexed position, excuse me, and he's coming down low to a shoulder extended position with rotation through the trunk. Now in this particular example, he's bracing his trunk and he's pivoting on that foot. So this is almost an anti-rotation exercise for the trunk. And in many cases in certain activities, that's what you want, especially if you're nursing some sort of back injury. We don't want the back to have to do anything too complicated, and we can mobilize through the joints that want to be mobile, like the hips, the ankles, and we don't have to put any additional strain on, let's say, the lumbar spine. Now, there are a couple different ways to do this exercise. One is to treat it like a pull and a push all integrated into one. I'll scoot back a little bit so that you can see me. But so if he's starting up here, he could pull that in almost like a low row and then turn, pivoting on that foot, and then push it down to his left. That would be one way to do it. Another option would be to keep that core locked in, use the hips, and transmit that power down with straight arms. Now we're really focusing on that anti-rotation component a little bit more, keeping the obliques and the muscles of the back engaged. So the mirror opposite might be a little bit tricky depending on the setup that you're using. In this case, she wanted to keep it more or less the same angle as his, so she got down on one knee. She could certainly stand up, but it might be a more exaggerated angle. If she didn't want that much of an exaggerated angle for the arms and shoulders, she could step further away from the machine to accomplish more or less the same with a standing posture. Okay, on to one of the last two. We want to pick the resistance and volume that elicits fatigue, but not rep failure or pain. So that is to say, we want to pick a challenge with every repetition that will, by the 10th repetition, leave us only 3 to 5 repetitions left on reserve. That's my definition of fatigue. There are other ones out there. But most important of all, we want to avoid failure. Now, this is what you see the gym guys doing all the time. If they're grunting, if they can barely re-rack that weight at the end of their chest press, chances are they're going for failure rather than fatigue. Another very important indicator is pain. If you ever have any discomfort outside of maybe the muscle burning a little bit, anything that feels sharp or just doesn't feel right to you, it's time to adjust or switch out that exercise. So I wanted to give you an example of a volume of exercise that would probably be sufficient for someone looking to either maintain their muscle or build a little bit of muscle over time. It might look something like this. So we have 3 to 5 sets of 10 repetitions in each category. By that I mean push, pull, squat. Now bear in mind that's only 30 to 50 total repetitions. I don't mean to say that we're going to go down the list of every type of squat there is and do 3 to 5 sets of those. We're going to select from whatever versions of the squat we're comfortable with to pick, let's say, 3 sets of 10 reps. You can do 4 sets, you can do 5 sets, but by the time we exceed 5 sets, there's a diminishing return. That is to say that we can only do so much useful damage to the muscles. There's an increased risk of injury by the time we get to 6, 7, 8 sets. Now that may be worth it to a bodybuilder, but chances are it's not going to be worth it to the average exerciser. Okay, so let's take a look at a possible routine here. Here I have a TRX-assisted squat. And this is an exercise I want to actually show you a video of. It's one of my favorites. Put him on mute. So essentially, he's using his arms and his back to provide whatever assistance he needs to get through that full range of motion. Now, he can hop closer to the anchor and maybe even get his hips just a tiny bit lower. Doesn't necessarily need to do that. I'll show you that one more time. But what this really does for us is it allows us to skip that hinge movement. When we use the hips and knees equally in our version of the squat, we're able to not only work the quadriceps, the front of the thigh, but also the hamstrings and the glutes. They get a nice deep stretch. Jumping back to where we were here. Let's see if I can get out of this full screen mode for a second. So we had the TRX-assisted squat. For our push, we did 10 reps of that. We might do a TRX high push. Let's zoom in a little bit here for you. Just like a push-up, except my hands are able to articulate apart so that I get a little bit more out of the chest and shoulders. It's also a little bit less stable than a traditional push-up, so you want to plan accordingly there. Next up, we have a high back row. So again, looking for that mirror opposite of the push. All right, so I've got my elbows up almost to shoulder height, just like the push. We might do a minute of rest if we need it, if we feel out of breath, or if we're not able to maintain a long neutral spine, engage the core. If we don't need that minute of rest, we could go right back into the next set. The beauty of the push-pull squat circuit is that while the squat muscles are resting, we can be working our push muscles. While the push muscles are resting, we can be working our pull muscles. So back onto the next set here, we might do this time, if we're up to it, a dumbbell squat. Now let's say she picks up these 10-pound dumbbells and after the first 3 reps she thinks, there's no way I'm making it to 10. Well, she has two options at that point. She can go ahead and set those dumbbells down and continue with just her body weight. She can pick a different resistance altogether, different set of dumbbells, that is. Or she can continue to use that weight and just limit the number of repetitions to the point of fatigue. That is to say, let's say she gets to 6 reps and she decides, I only have 3 left. Go ahead and stop there. It's much more important to do the squat with good form than to do it to 10 repetitions or some preconceived notion of what fatigue is. So that's our dumbbell squat. Then we might have a TRX high push. So why the same exercise? There's nothing wrong with double dipping on an exercise that you're comfortable with or that you're trying to learn. Sometimes it's better to do more of the same exercise if you are trying to focus on technique. Likewise for that high back row that we just did. Then we might have another 1 minute of rest, and then perhaps as our last squat, we do a TRX assisted lunge. Perhaps the legs are fatigued and we're not ready to take on more than maybe 2/3 of our body weight into the legs. Then maybe we try a dumbbell chest press. This is a low press, elbows at the rib cage. So for our pull, we might do 10 reps of our low row, elbow to the rib cage. So this is a pretty good routine as far as routines go, but it is missing some things. So I'd like to open it up to any ideas as to what this routine might be missing. I'll give you all about 60 seconds to mull it over, but go ahead and jump in if you think you know what it's missing. No wrong answers here. Every routine can be improved. I'll leave this steady here so that you can mull over those different exercises. And think about those 5 things that we talked about. We're not necessarily going to know, for example, if this is enough to elicit fatigue for any particular exerciser. But there are at least a couple things that might be missing from this. I'll give you another 30 seconds or so to think it over. If anything jumps out at you, just go ahead and chime in anytime.
Are the squats working opposite muscles? Because it seems to me like, I haven't done all those squats, but it seems like those squats would mainly be in the front of the leg.
Fantastic question. So we get back to that idea. Do I need a hinge in my exercises? So because we did this TRX assisted squat and presumably got our full active range of motion, this is not a traditional endpoint for a squat, right? If you go into a Group X class, they're going to say, okay, we don't want to go deeper than 90 degrees bend at the knee, 90 hips, 90 knee. In this case, he's going deep down into that squat, and he's working all the major muscles of the legs. He's even getting his tibialis anterior engaged. He's getting his calves engaged. He's got his hamstrings, his quads, and his glutes. Fantastic question, though. When it comes to squats, we typically don't need to find the mirror opposite. I really love where your head's at, though, because let's say we do get a little bit more advanced and we're doing something like the thruster. So this is where we do a squat with a press built in. Now, one of the muscles we might not be activating quite enough with a simple squat is the hip flexor, right? This is the muscle largely responsible for lifting my knees up as I bend my hips here. So this, or perhaps even just a hanging leg raise, you could do this on a captain's chair if you're not familiar. That's this one here. That looks familiar, hopefully, to most people who've been into the gym. You can do it on a captain's chair. Remember, you may feel your abs firing here, but the prime mover is iliopsoas, the hip flexors. So fantastic question. I think that's the only muscle that we'd really be leaving out if we're getting through the full range of motion. Any other ideas as to what might be missing from this? I'll leave it on this screen for a little bit of a hint. So what I'm hinting at here is there's not much trunk rotation. Now that may be okay. If you're not ready yet for trunk rotation or it's contraindicated for whatever reason, then the routine you see here would be fine. But how might we get trunk rotation into, let's say, our pole. Any ideas jump out at anyone? I'll tell you what I'm thinking of. Perhaps we do something like a TRX power pull. So here I've gone fully inverted. I'm hanging on with just one hand, and I'm going to reach up with this arm as I pull my left arm elbow to rib cage. So now I'm getting that great trunk rotation in addition to a fantastic low row. And if this seems too advanced for you, if you don't think you have the grip strength for it, all you have to do is walk your feet backwards and decrease the pitch of your body. So those are the things that jump out at me as missing from this routine. I'd like to open it up to any questions that anybody has. Feel free to chime in on what we've covered or any questions you have about your own routine or any particular exercise.
How long should you be sore afterwards? Because
Oh, I'm so glad you asked.
Yeah, that's what I struggle with because I don't like being sore for days, but then some people are like, that's how you know it works.
Yeah, and actually that reminds me, I skipped my last one here. So it's important to take an active rest day between every full body strength workout. That is to simply say we want to do activities like walking, swimming, things that don't tear down the muscle but help the muscle recover. So if you're sore more than 36 to 48 hours after lifting, you either tried something that's brand new and that's okay, or maybe your volume or your intensity, your resistance was a little bit too high. So perhaps if you did 4 or 5 sets and you felt really sore for 72 hours, maybe scale that back to 3 sets. If, let's say, you did 3 workouts that last week that left you by the 3rd workout very sore for 72 hours, maybe scale back to 2 workouts the following week. Or just reduce the resistance for the muscles that are the sorest. So for example, if the chest and shoulders are really sore, maybe we're not going to do 100 pounds on our chest press. Maybe we'll scale that back down to 70. Variety is the spice of life, but it's also the key to lifting long-term injury-free. That's why I tend to target fatigue. On some days, you're going to be able to lift a few more reps, and on some days you're going to have to stop at 6, 7 reps, and that's fine. Another reason you might do that is if your dumbbell set doesn't increment gradually enough. Typically we want to only increment the resistance about 5% between workouts. Maybe we're going to go to that higher resistance just to try it out and see what we can do. You never know if you might surprise yourself. But we're going to target fatigue. We're not necessarily going to target that same 10 rep mark so that we can get as many reps as we can get. And the next workout, maybe instead of 6 reps, we can do 7 and so on. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but I need to work on listening to my muscles.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a reminder, there are 2 simple ways you can decide how much resistance, how much volume to do. If by the 10th repetition of your 3rd set, you can only do 3 to 5 more repetitions on reserve, that is to say, it's a little subjective, but that is to say, I can do 3 more of these push-ups without my belly sagging or my pelvis tilting forward. I'm going to be able to keep that tailbone tucked, in other words. Then that's where you want to be at the end of that 3rd set. It's great if you reach fatigue after the 1st or 2nd set, but certainly by that 3rd set. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is simply to check in with yourself the day after the workout, maybe even 2 days after the workout, and say, am I still sore? If I'm a little bit sore, great. If I'm limping around, I must have gone a little too heavy, or the volume or frequency might be a little too high. Excellent questions. One of the things I like to do with my clients who aren't familiar with TRX is ask them for any exercise they might do at the gym that they wouldn't know how to do with just body weight. You don't have to do that on a TRX. We showed that for the assisted squat. You could do it as she's doing here on a hip height bar. That could be a shoulder height bar if she's not ready for this intensity yet. But I haven't been stumped yet. I've got an exercise for every dumbbell, barbell, machine, in terms of the muscles worked and the functional goal. Is anybody missing an exercise that they used to do at the gym?
In general, somebody else please ask questions if I'm asking too many.
Oh, no, please.
Yeah, pulls at home, because
Right.
it's very, like, push-ups are easy, but anything that I'm not strong enough to do a pull-up. But
Right, you mean you don't have one of these bars in your living room?
no, I have normal furniture, like a couch.
Yeah, most people would say the same, yeah. And actually, that's why people end up doing this terrible combination, right? The only thing they might have is something to do pull-ups on, and most people aren't strong enough to do a sufficient number of pull-ups. We want to end up in that hypertrophy range for most people's goals, which might be either weight loss or just building some muscle, improving their body composition, which is about 8 to 12 repetitions, or 10 for short. So what might this guy do in order to manage the opposite of his standard or advanced push-up? Now, I mentioned before, this gal could be under a sturdy dining room table. I don't love that idea because every dining room table is different in terms of the height and its stability. But what she might do is grab a TRX. This is my version of the TRX. It's less than $50 worth of components. I think these handles were available for about $12. I think they're out of stock right now, so you might have to get the ones that come with the bands for $35. And then this, if I'm not mistaken, is about $14 worth of roller cams. That's a particular brand of cam buckle. But the nice thing about it is it's got this roller on here, so it doesn't wear out the material like it might wear out on a TRX. But this exercise is great. Whether you have a pull-up bar or not, I'll show you how to hang it on a standard door, because it allows you to get into that pull, whether it's a high back row here or a low back row down here. And the beauty of this particular setup is, I can get these labels out of the way here, I can get this all the way to the top, and now I can do an assisted pull-up. So if I just did a set of shoulder press, let's say sagittal plane shoulder press about shoulder width apart, I can come here and do that mirror opposite just by relaxing my legs. All right, I've got my toes and my knees almost touching the door, exhaling on exertion, inhaling as I lengthen through that eccentric phase. And I'm keeping my trunk perpendicular to the ground in order to work the muscles I might work on a pull-up, the lats, the biceps. Does that answer the question for this one? And I'll give you one more option for hanging it. So the beauty of these handles is they come with this door anchor. And what you would do is open the door up, slide the anchor towards the hinge. Just get it as close as you can. It doesn't have to be right on the hinge. And then make sure to pull the door shut and apply some tension to that anchor point before you cinch on your straps. So this is just a lasso loop at the end. So this loop could go through this one right here just as easily as it goes over this pull-up bar. So that's one great option for your pulls, for those mirror opposites. But you don't have to get an external apparatus. There are other ways of doing it. I'll just go to a different page here. Let me jump down to my pulls for a second. Here's something you might find in a park if the weather is suitable. Maybe a shoulder height bar, right? So he can do that same assisted pull-up I just showed you with any shoulder height bar. This bar down here, which you'll often see at the parks, is closer to waist height. And from that one, he would probably get a good amount of resistance for a low or middle back row. You can even do a high back row on there if you're strong enough for it. But that's another great option. You can find any stable surface to grab onto at shoulder or waist height. And here's another great option for pulls if you don't have access to a sturdy surface to grab onto for bodyweight pulls. He's doing a low row here. I can't say that I love this in particular because of the extra strain on the back. This is kind of like doing a bent over row with the hips bent at 90 degrees. The reason that's problematic for most people is that the hamstrings aren't necessarily flexible enough for him to maintain this posture comfortably. He's got a nice tall back, but if this were me after a week of sitting at my desk, I might hunch forward as I do this, and that's going to put some undue shear strain on the spine. So a better option might be for him to get up on one knee, as we saw with the gal doing her wood chop or her golf swing, her hay baler. Get up on one knee and do the same exact exercise. And then you're getting the same benefit to the muscles of the back and the biceps without potentially straining the spine. But bands are great. I don't recommend the band that you see in these examples because when this snaps, it could hit her in the eyeball. Get a set of bands that have a sheath, nylon or polyester sheath over the rubber so that even if it breaks, it's not going to hurt you. I'll point out one more thing if you're inclined to use bands. These tend to come with a door anchor like the orange one that I showed you. One more thing to consider is when you're doing a row like she does at the top of this lunge right here, better to have a staggered stance like this so that if that band ever breaks, you're not going to fall over backwards. This is a nice stable position for the feet, whether you're doing the lunge or not. You can keep that staggered stance. Does that give you some good options?
It gave me some ideas for the local park. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, and you get your vitamin D while you're out there. So while I'm waiting for any other questions, I'll show some advanced versions of the squat. This is a suspended lunge, and this is almost like a single leg squat. He's got maybe 60–70% of his weight on this front leg. You can tell by his aggressive athletic stance here. And does a great job of keeping his trunk parallel with his shin without letting the knee pass the toes on this front foot. If you are female, you'll have a longer femur most often than the average male. The reason I mention that is your squat, going back to where we were, especially a dumbbell squat, there it is, might require you to bend more from the hips than from the knees. So in actuality, because of the nature of this gal's physiology, her squat is more of a deadlift than a squat. It's sort of a false dichotomy. There's some disagreement in the field about this, but in my mind, it's a totally false dichotomy, shades of gray all the way between a squat and a deadlift. And just the nature of her build, her body, that long femur between the knee and the hip, requires her to really bend and take a bow from the hips. She does a good job of keeping her chest up. Maybe too good of a job, actually. You want to maintain a long neutral spine, not an extended, not a rounded spine in either direction. But that's okay. It works for her because she's got the long femur and she can do that deadlift with a relatively safe form. I see a couple items in the chat here. Make sure I didn't miss anything here. Rep ranges we talked about. So we want to typically stay between 8 and 12 reps if the goal is hypertrophy or if we're trying to maintain muscle mass while we lose weight. That's going to be incumbent on you to monitor calories coming in and the quality of the food that's coming in. But there's nothing wrong once you've mastered the technique with doing a set of 1 to 3 reps. This is how power lifters train. When they do heavy lifts, we're talking hundreds of pounds on a deadlift like this, but maybe with a barbell, they're doing significant damage to the non-vascular tissues of their body, to those intervertebral discs, for example, between the vertebrae of the spine. They need at least 5 days to fully recover from the damage they do, even on a set of maybe 3 repetitions. So for them, they're going to want to wait maybe 5 days, maybe a full week every time before doing the deadlift again because of that damage that accrues. So like I said, 10 reps is a good rule of thumb for most people, especially if you're learning technique. You can go well above that. You can go all the way up to 20 if your main goal is to learn the technique, provided you ramp down the resistance so that we don't reach fatigue before that last repetition. And it's really going to depend on your specific goal. So if you have a specific goal in mind, let me know and I'll adjust accordingly. I think there was one more item in the chat there. Here we go. So we have a few more minutes if any questions come to mind.
Hey, Aaron, before we sign off, I just want to thank you again for taking the time and making the effort to give a another really informative professional presentation as part of
It's my pleasure.
As part of the Learning Center. So much appreciated.
Anytime. And once again, thank you all for coming and for taking the time out of the day. I know questions will come up as you try these types of exercises on your own, so please don't hesitate to reach out anytime. We're doing personal training through the gym, but also I can meet you outdoors if that's your preference. Lots of different options for you, including Zoom and other modalities. But keep in mind, you can be your own trainer provided that you take your time, you pace yourself, and that you learn from what your body tells you. If you ever feel any pain, if you ever feel something isn't quite right or you're not convinced that you're doing it with proper technique, that's the time to look for that help either online or from a certified personal trainer.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Have a great day, everybody.
This has been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Thank you.